Hey, what's up? My name's Conan. I'm a second-year resident physician. There's been a ton of important news over the past couple of weeks, especially pertaining to residency and healthcare in general, and I thought I'd spend a little bit of time going over that with you guys. Oh, just a quick disclaimer, but I'm going to be talking about some potentially controversial topics in this video, and so all of the viewpoints that I express in this video are mine and mine alone, not related to any institution that I work for or anything like that. So, biggest piece of news is U.S. Supreme Court set to overturn Roe versus Wade abortion rights decision. This is honestly a crazy piece of news. Honestly, shocking that this is even a thing because this has been in place for such a long time at this point. And I think the implications are vast for all women, for patients, any pregnant person. It's just crazy how big of an impact this decision could potentially make. And for me, my initial thoughts of this as a physician is, our mantra is to do no harm. We had to take an oath that says to do no harm. And yet in this case, we are being limited by the government. So if this does pass and certain states do outlaw or ban abortion, then women will not be able to get the care that they need and they deserve, which is really going completely against a physician's need to do no harm, because a lot of times people need to have these procedures done in order to save their life. This also happens with insurance, where there's very important medications that we need to get for patients, but insurance basically has the decision, like somehow they become basically the doctor because they get to choose what medications are approved or not approved through insurance. And so as physicians, these developments from the government or insurance companies are really going to limit your ability to do no harm to patients and to provide them with the best possible care. And it's just really weird because it's literally people who have never studied any medicine at all. They've just been, lawyers or business people, and they don't know anything about medicine, and yet they're somehow the ones who are being responsible for making these medical decisions. This person says, what is going to happen to women who need abortions to save their lives? Will there be any exceptions for them if this happens? Considering the places that specifically think ectopic pregnancy should not be an exception, no, there won't be exceptions. It will be on a state-by-state basis. They literally think an ectopic pregnancy can be re-implanted into the uterus. Like, forget science, y'all. These effing lawmakers cracked the code. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Somehow, these lawmakers are becoming doctors now, and doctors cannot be doctors. Because a lot of times, these pregnancies are life-threatening, and you need to do something. You need to induce an abortion to save the patient's life. They are already working on a federal abortion ban. Apparently, this article says Republicans will try to ban abortion nationwide if Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade report. I like this comment here. The point really is, though, that I think everyone should be fighting for, beyond obvious bodily autonomy, is that who gets to decide what is too risky or not and is an acceptable reason to end a pregnancy. If only these pregnant women had someone who is trained to counsel them on the pros and cons and then come to a decision. Like all healthcare decisions. If life begins at conception, why didn't Trump send my unborn child a stimulus check when I was pregnant in 2020? LOL. And to be honest, this frequently comes down to a left versus right or liberal versus conservative issue. I do have my own biases as well, but mainly in this video, I want to be looking at the patient and healthcare related consequences of overturning such a huge decision like this. Why are humans above the age of 80 allowed to dictate the next 50 plus years of a country's legal direction? They barely understand how to operate within the modern realms of society, let alone determine what is relevant or current. Too true. So one of the big implications for this is that a lot of people who would potentially be working in states as OBGYNs where abortion is currently legal but is going to be made illegal, there has been a lot of people posting that they're no longer going to be willing to work in states like that. And it's going to really even vastly worsen the outcomes in those states even more than they already are. So already those states may have worse outcomes because they're going to have abortion bans. But now you're going to be really limiting the pool of people who are willing to work in those areas because they can't provide the best patient care there. And so it just becomes this spinning wheel of worsened patient outcomes for, unfortunately, the poor pregnant patients who are living in those states. All I can say is, as doctors, we need to avoid those states like the plague, not only because I am pro-choice, but I am pro-doctors making the best choices for their patients' health. This person says, I agree in some ways, but also I'm a medical student in Arkansas right now. We're already so desperate for good physicians here. The idea of abandoning my home and all of the women that deserve better care here breaks my heart and fills me with rage. Some of us need to stay and fight and not give up. Otherwise, the amount of women that will die from this decision will just keep growing. This is a really nice copy pasta that I've been seeing flying around Facebook recently, but it starts by saying, I'm not pro-murdering babies. I'm pro Becky, who found out at her 20-week anatomy scan that the infant she had been so excited to bring into this world had developed without life-sustaining organs. I'm pro Teresa, who hemorrhaged due to a placental abruption, causing her parents, spouse, and children to have to make the impossible decision on whether to save her or her unborn child. I'm pro little Kathy, who had her innocence ripped away from her by somebody she should have been able to trust, and her 11-year-old body isn't mature enough to bear the consequence of that betrayal. I'm pro Melissa, who's working 2 jobs just to make ends meet and has to choose between bringing another child into poverty or feeding the children she already has because her spouse walked out on her. I'm pro Courtney, who just found out that she's already 13 weeks along, but the egg never made it out of her fallopian tube, so either she terminates the pregnancy or risks dying from internal bleeding. You can argue and say that I'm pro-choice all that you want, but the truth is I'm pro-life, their lives, pregnant people's lives. You don't get to pick and choose which scenarios should be accepted. All right, let's move on to another piece of news. So the White House considers excluding high earners and residents from student loan relief. So apparently Joe Biden said that he wants to forgive a lot of student loan debt, but for people who make high incomes, such as doctors and lawyers, he wants them to be exempt from this loan forgiveness. And for me, this is obviously just kind of a terrible thing because people just don't understand how much debt people graduate with, especially from law school or medical school. So people frequently are graduating with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in debt. And that is continuing to accumulate as they're going through residency, where they're making just barely above minimum wage for how many hours they're working. And it just seems like a very short-sighted thing where basically anybody who earns a high income later in life basically just gets punished because there's no realization of the opportunity cost of getting that salary and how much, sacrifice it takes to actually get to that point later down in life. Why do we keep getting shafted? Like, what did we do to deserve this? I wake up, I go to work, I do the best I can taking care of patients. I spend hours sitting writing notes for my attending, and I'm always afraid I'll get fired for something dumb because I won't be able to hold my tongue. I'm tired. I'm just tired. So people with finance and MBA degrees are not excluded. Computer scientists making $250K in California or remotely too. So this is going on to state that, a lot of our friends who are in their 20s are making $200,000 or more. Or maybe 180. They're high income earners too, and they get to start making that money from as soon as they graduate college, and yet their student loans are going to be forgiven because there's a perception against doctors and lawyers, but there isn't that same kind of perception against high earning computer engineers. The US, oh no, we have a physician shortage. This is a crisis. Also the US, we need to keep shafting future physicians. The beatings will continue until morale improves. What happened to being a healthcare hero and being at the front lines during COVID? People who sign up for the military and serve their country get free tuition. Why shouldn't we? We sacrifice our youth, wellness, and health to serve our communities. Why do we also have to be on the hook for $200,000? When they say tax the rich, they mean earners making $200 to $500K. They do not go after the huge wealthy owners and those with equity. They find ways to exclude doctors and income bracket out of everything. All right, now a piece of good news. So all ACGME programs are now supposed to guarantee 6 weeks of paid paternity leave starting July 1st. They're not going to officially require it until July 2023. So your program, if they're slow on this, may actually just wait an entire year to actually enact this. And for me, it's probably not going to affect me because I don't think I'll have a kid by the time I finish residency. But this is obviously a really good piece of news for the well-being of physicians in training. Bad paternity leave options was a huge reason not to have kids during residency. This is amazing. This person says, damn, guess it's time to have a kid. And I like this one. Signs of burnout. When you consider getting your new girlfriend pregnant just for some time off. I am getting married soon and just went from let's wait to let's get started. Finished rounding forever. Happy. I am a prelim. Yesterday was my last time rounding in my entire life. After the last patient, I dropped to my knees and sat on the floor and stared up at Jesus and Allah and Buddha and everyone and praise be, this won't be my life moving forward. I thought it would feel better, but I'm too tired to feel anything. Only 2 months until this year is over. Hey, let's run the list one more time. Why do you think the sodium is 131? There's apparently a global IV contrast shortage, and I actually just got an email about this from my own institution as well. But we're nearly out of IV contrast and have no timeline for when we can get more. Apparently, this seems to be due to a temporary factory shutdown in Shanghai due to their recent lockdowns, which is a whole nother issue that I've only cursorily followed. But really, it seems like there's these crazy lockdowns going in Shanghai that are really not necessary, but are impacting so many people over there. Can we just go back to having a hydralazine shortage? Being told told people couldn't order IV hydralazine was one of my happiest medication shortages. So this is going to the point that a lot of times when a patient's blood pressure systolic goes above 180, nurses will page you because it's pretty high blood pressure, hypertensive urgency, but really it should be called asymptomatic severe hypertension. And a lot of times they're going to be requesting a PRN hydralazine, IV hydralazine, to lower their blood pressure. When a lot of times, we may order it because it just makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, but all of the evidence shows that doing this practice has A, no benefit, but B, actually has potential for increased harm for the patient. And really, it can tank people's blood pressures much more than you might expect. So this is another one of those things where it's like, do no harm. So if the patient is not having any symptoms, we really shouldn't be giving IV hydralazine as much as we do. Long rounds. I am intern here. We have an attending. She recently graduated last 2 years. She takes a long time rounding. Her rounds go beyond noon conference. We're not getting any work done until 2 p.m. She is not registering that. Rounds are scattered. She takes a long time seeing patients, and she expects us to be there. Why? So I'm actually going to make a video in the next couple of weeks talking about bedside rounding and kind of what my thoughts are on that, because I've kind of had a renewed interest in potentially trying out bedside rounding. Although a lot of people don't like it, the evidence actually shows that bedside rounding is actually a time saver in the long run and also increases patient satisfaction. Anyways, that's for another video. But this is a cool alternative that somebody talked about. So on my medicine rotation, we once had a attending who would go over all the patients with the entire team for learning purposes, but would then take one resident at a time and the relevant medical student and individually round with each resident and student. Once the attending was done rounding on that resident's patients, he would grab the next resident. This would allow residents to work on tasks until it was their turn to round individually with the attending. So I will say that at my institution, we usually round with the medical students' patients and then any kind of critical or more active patients. And then the rest of the patients will do table rounds. But the thing is that even when we're seeing the medical students' patients, most of the time we're doing hallway rounds, which is kind of the worst of both worlds compared to table rounds and bedside rounds. So again, this will be something I'll discuss in a future video. Why do so many ID doctors work as hospitalists? I'm surprised by how many hospitalists at my institution were also board certified infectious disease docs. One of the ID fellows who graduated last year is even doing general hospitalist here. You lose money working in infectious disease. It literally pays less because so much of the specialty is behind the scenes but very time consuming. Insurance and Medicare don't value cerebral specialties, which is very unfortunate, definitely. There's no box to easily check in the EMR for diagnostic accuracy or being thorough, which is totally true because the best ID doctors are definitely probably the most thorough people in the entire hospital, and they really do not get rewarded for that, unfortunately. People fall in love with the idea of being whichever specialist, then realize they make less money than if they are a hospitalist. I've seen it with nephrology as well. It's why I maintain you shouldn't do a sub-fellowship as IM unless you won't be happy without it. The real thing is that 95% of people going into IM only went into it because they ultimately wanted a subspecialty from the beginning. Finding IM residents that went into it saying, I want to be a general internist, is exceedingly rare. Most hospitalists are people that start out wanting to subspecialize and change their mind either because they realize general medicine is fine, they get sick of training, they come to their senses. So I think all of those apply to me. I think general medicine is fine. I get sick of training, and hopefully I think I've come to my senses. But that leaves a lot of people that only want IM to begin with so they could end up in insert specialty. And by the time they realize it's not worth it, it's 2 a.m. in their PGY 5 year doing a consult for rule out osteo in a diabetic foot. Getting less rare though with hospitalist pay getting close to $300K. Half of my residency wants hospitalist life now. I think that market is going to cool off though with all the new IM residencies though. For your information, to those who don't know, this system has and will not ever have our best interests in mind. For evidence, look no further than Jung versus AAMC. So basically, I was reading the Wikipedia article for this, and basically this was an attending who was suing the AAMC for overworking residents, basically, and saying that they were creating a monopoly system with the match and that there was no competition and residents basically have no choice in where they go. The 3 physicians who launched the suit alleged that the NRMP matching program was an anti-competitive practice, claiming that 4th-year medical students were required to apply to the match and had no opportunity to negotiate their terms of employment. The defendants limited the number of residency positions available. The defendants placed substantial obstacles to the ability of a resident to transfer employment. The ACGME required participation in the match as a condition of accreditation for institutions offering residencies, and the defendants shared information on conditions of employment and reviewed them in order to keep salaries low. So what ended up happening in this case is that the AAMC basically just ignored this and just went through a backdoor approach to make this case completely irrelevant because they started lobbying and bribing people so that this case could be thrown out pretty much. So the lawsuit ended when Congress enacted legislation as a rider added to an unrelated bill that exempted participation in a matching program from federal antitrust laws. The matching program is literally a monopoly, and they were able to lobby to continue their monopoly on the whole residency system. It's pretty crazy. The rider was lobbied for by the AAMC and the American Hospital Association, sponsored by Senator Judd Gregg and Senator Edward Kennedy. So now you see that corruption lies on both sides of the aisle. I think the first guy was a Republican, Ted Kennedy was a Democrat. All they care about is the money. They don't care about the actual legislation that they're passing most of the time. I will say I am happy that some of these senators criticized the way that the rider was added. Anyways, that was a lot of stuff to cover. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Obviously, there's some very pessimistic news, which tends to be the case on r/residency. You know, people are burnt out. They're tired. They want to complain a lot. So r/residency does tend to be on the negative side. But I definitely think there were some big newsworthy topics that needed to be covered. And I wonder what your opinions are on these same issues. What do you think about abortion being banned, about the AAMC kind of maintaining their monopoly by lobbying in Congress, student loan debt being forgiven for everybody except for doctors and lawyers? Curious to hear what your thoughts are on those. Sorry I haven't made a video in a little bit. I was a little sick, and so I'm still recovering from that, but I'm definitely looking forward to making some more videos soon. I want to make a video on acid base, AKI, a lot of other things that I've been thinking about recently, and then I'm going to be going on my CCU rotation, which is going to be a very demanding rotation, but I'll continue trying to hopefully pump out some videos for you guys soon. So thanks again for watching. Really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.